Right, welcome everybody to this online seminar from Mutual Value. I want to start with a question for you, which is to ask this, those vision values documents, the purpose that you or your partners or your clients wrote in good times, are they what's being used to drive behaviours right now and the decisions that are being taken? Is that what is being constantly referenced as people make decisions in the middle of this crisis? If it is, then fantastic. If it's not, then the next 45 minutes is a chance to think how it might be, because our view is the story you write now by the actions and behaviors that you take will be the foundation of your organization's success as we re-emerge into what we're calling the new normal. We're delighted in this discussion to have Philip King taking part. Philip is the government's Small Business Commissioner, and he will share with us some of his perspective on what's happening in the marketplace, particularly how large organizations are working with their ecosystems at this time. And just a quick bit of housekeeping. We very much would like you to take part in this discussion. And we see this as a seminar, not a presentation. And there are a couple of ways you can do that. The first is you'll see next to your name, there's a kind of little hand you can raise, and we'll be keeping an eye on that and inviting you to you'll be muted, but we'll unmute you so you can actually speak and share your thoughts and ideas or perspectives. And secondly, there's a Q&A box which you can see, and if you want to ask, just write a note down, a thought, a question, you can do that there too, and we'll share that at the right moments. And there may be at various points where we just invite you to take part. We really want to encourage people to share their thoughts, so that may happen to at various points in the conversation. Let me start with a story. You may recognize this from the email that we sent out a couple of days ago. Ricardo Semler, 30 years ago, Brazil was facing a massive crisis, and his business that he ran, a manufacturing business, was like all the other businesses in that sector facing an existential crisis. How are they going to respond to what was going on? The way he responded, as you may know, was exactly the opposite of how you might7expect. He turned around to his employees, to the trade unions he worked with and others that he worked with, and said, here are the facts. We're facing a series of decisions. What should we do? And he essentially leveraged the relationships that he had, built on those relationships, and and developed stronger relationships, not only to survive, but to thrive. And the business went from $4 million a year to over $200 million a year, not that many years later, about 20 years later or less. So massive success, constant growth, and the importance of using maybe a crisis to think, how should I respond that's going to be the foundation of strength in the future? Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart, and good morning, everybody. Welcome from me to our session here. I think this is fascinating because we're all now experiencing a crisis which people are putting into, warlike standards and levels. What Semler did, which is so interesting, is he thought about leveraging the relationships he had, as Stuart said. And we've got some recent examples of how people are thinking the same way. So relationships with their vendors, relationships with their employees, relationships with their clients. I just want to contrast for you two experiences. First is the experience of what we've just seen as a bunch of consultants advising legal firms. And their advice to the legal firms was really interesting. What they said was, get hold of every client and get all the cash that you're owed. Tell your employees not to claim their expenses. Don't pay your partners any more than you basically need to. And if they're retiring, make sure you pay them out as slowly as you can. And don't pay your bills. So it's a really fascinating approach to relationships. Manages cash flow, may not manage relationships. The alternative is a large construction business that we're working with, who also looked at their relationships. They're obviously faced with a massive downturn in business, and they're looking at suppliers, employees, and their clients, and they're saying, we're going to make decisions which will, yes, they'll have impact, but they'll be done in such a way that as we come through this, all those relationships will be stronger and we can rebuild this business and our clients' business and our employees quickly. So the same kind of relationships with a very different attitude. And I'd have you think about which of those organizations are telling a story that you would want to participate in any role going forward. So a little bit about who we are. Well, hopefully you can either read this now or you know a little bit about us. I'm fascinated with relationships and how we leverage relationships and the human spirit of collaboration to create more powerful outcomes for the participants. And I believe that this new normal that we're going into, the winners will be those who see this as a tipping point, an articulation point, where we will turn towards collaboration and co-creation of outcomes as being a way forward for the future, as opposed to the alternative, which is to transactionalize ourselves and basically we potentially risk the breakdown of society.
Yeah, just a quick intro to me too. Again, you can see my background there. My background as a journalist and narrative and build narrative. And there's a fundamental view that I have, which is that the story that you write is the foundation of the reality that you create. I think it's undeniably true. And so if we think about what may be at what we're describing the new normal, you can see it in individuals' behaviors now, not just companies. Some people are really reaching for a relationship, except in fact creating new relationships, being collaborative, supportive, seeing how they can help. Others are grasping and grabbing and thinking, what do I need to do to survive for myself? And I think this can be reflected in the way companies, organizations are behaving. And as Kevin said, what story are you writing that actually people are going to tell when you emerge, and therefore, who will they want to do business with? Let's just have a very quick poll, just so you see where people are. So just to get a quick sense check, please just vote in one of those three there. Are you in crisis mode, just responding to events right now? Have you reached some kind of equilibrium where you're preparing, you or the people you're working with, preparing or ready for dealing with things now? Or are you at the stage where you are thinking about the future, working out how you're going to transition into the new normal? Where are you now? Give you a moment there. Let's just, sorry, I've mentioned the poll. I didn't launch it. So let me launch it so you can see it. There it is. And there's three options. Please just click on which most reflects where you or your organization are at this moment. Just give you a moment to validate. Just the reason I wanted to do this is twofold. One is a reflection. Right now is perhaps the most dangerous time for many organizations. How they react to crisis, the knee-jerk that may be going on now, may be causing untold damage, and they may spend the rest of this crisis and their emergence period trying to undo the damage they've done to their reputation. And secondly, over several weeks, we're going to run these discussions, and we suspect that the answers to this will change. Now, according to this, I'm not sure I've got any results. So let me just relaunch it again. Just can you please vote, because I've got no votes. Are you able to see?
You can now see it. It wasn't showing before, Stuart. Thank you.
Okay, I thought it was. Sorry, I thought I'd launched it. There we are. So the two thoughts there is, if people are behaving now in a way that is potentially causing long-term damage because they're reacting in a knee-jerk way, that is what we want everyone to think about. Okay, a couple more still to vote. I'll give you just a moment to do that. Okay, let's just end the poll. Share the results. So interestingly, can you see that?
No, not yet, Stuart.
You seeing that now?
No.
Okay, participant, please on the chat let us know if you're seeing that, because according to my session, according to what I'm seeing, you can see it now. So no, you can't. Thank you, Richard. Okay, well, I'll tell you what it says because I can see it, and according to this, I've shared it with you all. So this is obviously a glitch in the system. Interestingly, no one has said they're in crisis mode, which surprises me. 78% of you have said you're in a transition period, effectively reached, you're now dealing with things as they are to operate during the outbreak. And actually, 22% of you saying you're in a transition period, beginning to plan how you'll re-emerge. So actually, people are not saying they're in crisis mode, which is interesting.
It's just appeared and it just disappeared, Stuart.
Okay, well, there you go. You see what I just said is what it says there. Okay. So let's move on to one other poll now. And Kevin, I'll let you introduce this.
Yeah, well, open the poll if you would, Stuart. So yeah. The point we're asking now is, okay, so, well, you can see what we're asking. Let's just give people a moment to review the question, and then we'll get back to what the answers are. Okay, do you want to close when people have voted, Stuart, if you could close it?
Yeah.
And let's have a look.
Okay. Now.
So the great thing is that the people that are on this, you're already starting to think of transition and transitioning out, which is great. And the other encouraging thing is clearly there's nobody worried that they'll survive in a similar form, but confidence is not huge as to we could come out this stronger. So our ambition here is to say, how could we actually improve the chances? Nothing is guaranteed, but how could we improve the chances that we come out of this stronger? And I think it'd be really helpful now to use this idea as a base of a bit of discussion. I think Philip, Stuart, you want to have Philip share some of his thinking at this point.
Yeah. So Philip, hopefully you saw that.
I did.
Just to remind people, I've put your kind of job description up there on the screen so they can see what you're there to do. And I know that you're involved very much on an ongoing basis in how particularly large companies deal with smaller companies. What are you seeing in terms of behaviours, decisions being taken in the UK by larger companies vis-a-vis their ecosystem of supply chain?
Thanks, Stuart, and good morning, everybody. I was interested in Kevin's points there around the variety or the divergence of business and the way they're dealing with this. And that's exactly what I'm seeing. I'm seeing some incredibly good examples of businesses doing what they can to do the right thing and recognizing their power and their influence in doing so. And I'm seeing some, frankly, appalling examples of businesses doing the wrong thing. And if I can just share two very simple examples, about 10 days ago, Morrison's came out and said that they were going to pay all their small suppliers immediately. So they were going to recategorize small as being any business that spent £1 million with them a year, where previously it had been 100,000. And secondly, they were going to pay any invoices they got on their books immediately and not wait for the payment term to be reached. And that for me was a really proactive way of saying, we can do something to help here, and we will. Yesterday, I was on a webinar with a business organization, and somebody rang in who said they just had an email from one of their customers saying, really sorry, COVID-19 is horrible for all of us. We're not going to pay anybody. Full stop. We're just not going to pay you. And I'm now in the process of picking that up, and I'm going to talk to the managing director of that business later today to try and understand and challenge what I think is pretty irresponsible way of dealing. And I think, we have to recognize that there are businesses that are in real trouble. And gladly, from your poll just now, nobody said they were fearful of surviving. But there are businesses that are in real trouble and are struggling. And in those cases, there may well be examples where somebody physically cannot pay one of their suppliers. But my view of this is that we need collaboration, not confrontation. And the way to deal with that situation is to communicate, have conversations, have discussions, explain, and come to an agreement that this is what we can do and should do. To do a blanket email to all your suppliers saying, sorry lads, we're just not going to pay you, seems to me to be a complete reckless disregard of the business relationship. And all business relationships, for me, should be partnerships. And that's what we need to see.
So the question is, what is the impact, in your view, not just now, but of course, on the assumption that that business does survive and emerges? When they do emerge, what happens?
Well, it's hard to say, isn't it? But we're seeing some really strong reactions from the public to things that are happening. We saw the reaction to Sports Direct decision to increase some prices and to stay open when the public felt they shouldn't. And there was a hue and cry. And a lot of these things pass and people forget very quickly. But I think, you know, in the position we're in at the moment, people have got a lot of time to think about what's going on around them. And I think for a business that takes a less than responsible approach, there will be a kickback post this crisis when businesses say, you know what, if I've got a choice of who I deal with, I'm going to deal with the businesses that I respected and, you know, I wanted to be like during this crisis time. So I think those businesses will suffer as a result of their poor behaviour. And Stuart, can I just share the anecdote I shared with you yesterday about the bigger picture rather than just payment? A few years ago, I had a conversation with the chief procurement officer of a really large food business that we would all know and would see in every high street. And it was just after the floods had hit Cumbria very badly. And in this meeting, the procurement director was telling me how he'd rung one of their small suppliers who supplies vegetables to them. And they have a number of suppliers, all from the UK, and it's a limited number. And he'd rung this guy and said, you know, how are things with you? And the guy had said, oh, the world's awful. I've lost some of my dairy herd. The crops are a disaster and so on. But don't worry, you're going to be okay. I will make sure you get every shipment you need. And he said to him, well, how can you guarantee that? And why are you guaranteeing that? And he said, simple. You're the only customer I've got that's rung to make sure I'm okay right now. And that to me is nothing to do with the transaction. It's to do with the emotional human value of business relationships. And I have two current catchphrases. One is we need collaboration, not confrontation. And the second is that we need to move the agenda from the transactional to the emotional. And at a time like this, the emotions are absolutely paramount. And the way we deal with our partners, whether they be suppliers or customers or whatever, the way we deal with them will influence how they behave now, and I believe how they behave in the future.
Well, that's fantastic. Thanks very much, Philip. And we'll come back to some of that and invite you to take part in the conversation as it continues. Kevin, do you want to just open that up?
Yeah, I think it's a really great point to open it up. I mean, and this is where we really encourage people to participate. Just raise your hand as soon as you'd like to say something, or we can perhaps do a quick poll round, Stuart. But I'm interested in what behaviours you're seeing from others that are creating their story for the future. And if I may, I'll just, while you're thinking about that, I remember receiving an email when I was managing director of business from a large supplier saying all of our not a large customer, all of our suppliers are giving us 20% discount in these tough times. If you don't, we'll cease dealing with you. And it's just fascinating that people would even consider then or now writing that kind of thing, because it shaped my view of them. So, yeah, Stuart, you can see the hands, I can't, but can we get people to think about this? That whatever you're doing, this is writing a story. So what are you seeing in others that they're already doing, which is writing a story? Let's start with that one first.
Well, if I may, actually, Michael, I see you're there, Michael Jenkins. Michael's based in Singapore. So we talked about the UK. Be very interesting, Michael, you need to unmute yourself to share what you're seeing in your part of the world.
Oh, hello, everyone. Can you hear me, Stuart?
Yeah, hear you perfectly.
Yeah, so we watched or took part in an Economist webinar this morning, which is looking at the economic effects of COVID on Southeast Asia. And what was interesting was they were talking a lot about how the human dimension was coming to the fore. And I sent in a question and said, did the panel think that post-COVID-19 that we would see a positive effect on society more broadly in terms of a more caring and compassionate society emerging? And one of the panelists, who was the CEO of a big pharmaceutical company, said that on the taxi ride into the sort of studio for the discussion with The Economist, she had a chat with the taxi driver of the kind that she said she could never have imagined, having that discussion with him, where he talked about how all the other cabbies were looking out for each other, doing things that perhaps they would never have done before. So that's sort of at an individual level. And I think at a company level, one of the big HR organizations here is organizing a bus that can take people to and from the airport where people work, rather than having people have to spend money to go on to take taxi rides, which they would not otherwise do. They have them ride on the bus, having had their temperatures taken, so that they are in good shape to make that journey, and basically doing all of that for free. So Singapore is not actually renowned for being incredibly altruistic, and so seeing some of these stories emerging is very interesting to us.
Can I just ask, one of the participants asked, what's the mix of people on this call? So do you mind just saying, Michael, what you do out there, so people get a sense of the different, as people talk, they can perhaps share the sort of role they play in the economy?
Yeah, sure. I'm currently running a leadership development organization, but shortly setting up my own business to look at, broadly speaking, the humanization of the workplace. Some people have said, is it a really good idea to start a new business in the middle of a pandemic? But I think for a lot of people on the call, there's probably never an ideal moment to start a business. But we'll be looking at ways to make human interactions in the workplace more human. The little business that we're setting up, my wife and I will also be bringing in a cultural dimension to the work that we do. So that's broadly what we're currently doing and will be doing in the future. So seeing what happens on a granular level, a human level, as a result of COVID is very interesting to us. And of course, what we're currently discussing with you guys here in the sort of business to business framework is also incredibly interesting.
Can I just also get people to comment? That Stuart's put another kind of question I'm interested in. So many people think of their organizations as purpose-led. And there's been a lot of studies in recent years that purpose-led organizations outperform transactional functional organizations significantly. And, you know, we've all got very used to having values and vision statements. And I just wondered if you can reflect, either for your own business or others, how much those values and vision statements have driven the decisions or not in the current situation. So I'd be fascinated. And one of the guys I know we've got on the call is Jonathan Mindell, who's a customer experience expert. Jonathan, I wondered if you'd care to comment on any of that.
You need to unmute yourself, Jonathan, your end. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, can I repeat the question?
So I was saying that the behaviours, organizations previously felt that they were purpose-led, strong values and vision, and that was how they wanted their customers to see them and their behaviours. And I wondered what your experience as a customer experience expert is that what people are seeing at the moment in the market, that people are still purpose-led?
It's quite interesting. There seem to be two different strategies going on right now. There are people who are very focused on looking after their customers, And but equally, there are organisations who clearly feel they're in a bit of a crisis, and and it's everyone for themselves, and the customer gets left in the middle. I've seen that personally myself. I'm supposed to be taking, in fact, today I should be flying on Aer Lingus on a business meeting, which obviously I'm not. And they have been very responsive in the way in which they have dealt with the fact that I can't. The door is going here, and I'm the only one here. I've got a great anecdote, but I need to answer the door. Sorry.
Life intervened.
I'll be back in a tick.
Well, can I just say a moment, Kevin? If you're Kevin Condren, you're from a very large firm that we'll all know. If you want to say where you're from, and
sure.
And I'd just be interested in what you're seeing. You may not be able to talk specifically. You might want to talk about IBM, but also the companies you're dealing with. Do you see the values that they've talked about coming to life in the way they're behaving in this situation?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. So yes, Kevin Condren. I lead the marketing for industrial sector for IBM. Currently based in New York. In terms of our response, yeah, very much trying to live the values of what we would see as being applying technology for good purposes. So really trying to lean into the trust and transparency that we try and bring to our clients. So just now that means diverting resources to help our clients, some of whom are in that deep crisis mode that you mentioned earlier on. Others who are actually overwhelmed by the response. So, for example, companies who provide equipment to the medical professions are obviously encountering a very different kind of challenge from, say, somebody like a big oil and gas company who are both dealing with the current crisis plus the collapse in the price of oil. So we're trying to bring things like how can we donate time, energy, resources to help clients in whatever way we can. So the mix that I see in clients across the world just now, Stuart, is very mixed. Some are just in that retread, take stock, do what we can. Others are overwhelmed by what they need to do. So we're seeing all points in the spectrum just now.
I just wonder if I may ask on that, whether there is a sense in what you're seeing in those different companies of the long term at all. I mean, obviously people are in some cases in crisis mode and just dealing with stuff, but whether there is some sense that they're explicitly putting into practice the values they've demonstrated before, or indeed have a sense that they're building a story for the future, which they can turn around and proudly talk about?
For the vast majority, Stuart, I would say no, they're not in that mode yet. I would say the majority are in that crisis mode that you referred to earlier on, that it's day to day, see what they can do, make sure cash flow is there, make sure that their people are safe, that they can continue trading, but a lot of them, I would say, are just trying to get day to day just now. I'm not seeing a huge amount, or certainly not visible yet, of where do they see this as, and I hate to use the word opportunity, but do they see this as some kind of inflection point that allows them to come out of the other side into a new normal, or a new world. I think they will get there. I think this will be an inflection point, but we're not seeing many of them currently play a hand, apart from, as other speakers have already mentioned, maybe in terms of that supplier customer relationship. But some of the others are currently doubling down.
Kevin, do you want to come in there too?
Yeah, so I would like to come in. I'd love Jonathan to be able to finish his story.
Yeah,
He says it's a good one.
Thank
so
you.
yeah, you can hear me. My view is that depending on how customers are treated during this particular phase, that's what customers will remember. So my anecdote is with had two airlines. I was supposed to be flying to Cork today on business. The flight is actually going, but I'm not. And I'm getting online. I can get a refund. Well, it's a voucher, but it's because of the inconvenience. It's 110% of what I paid. So ultimately, assuming the airline is still running, when I reschedule it, I've got an extra 10% to play with, which is yeah, great. And the other airline, used to be called the world's favorite airline. I was supposed to be flying to Malaga in a couple of weeks' time. I'm not, because they've cancelled the flight, so I'm entitled to a full refund. I go online and I can only get the full refund if I ring them up, which operationally is just bizarre, because of course the queues are long. The customer service agents are going to have and they've got a nightmare already, because there are a few of them and there are more calls. And why add to that operational burden by only having only being able to offer a full refund if you ring in? Because
that's great, Jonathan. Yeah.
And so as I go forward, I will remember those two airlines and their different approaches. One being quite customer centric, the other one being actually against the customer, because I could go online and get vouchers, but why should I? I'm my right, so I can get my money back. The airline might not exist anymore. It's just they're making it difficult for you, and that's the thing. If you go in retail, if you go in any of the other situations that we find ourselves in right now, there'll be winners and losers. It'll be, though, on what customers remember about the experience during COVID-19.
So thanks for that, Jonathan. I mean, I think that's the point. We've all had this stuff about, our behaviours, clarity, purpose. I think what we need to think about is, how will we now make sure that whatever story we choose to write, whatever behaviours we choose to create, we've got a way of doing it in a method which becomes powerful for our business. And I think we'd just like to share with you our thoughts on what that needs to look like.
So here's a way of thinking about how you construct. But by the way, one of the points Martin, I think, made on the chat is this is about timing. Currently people may be in the headlights, but actually, as things emerge, that will change. That's true. But what we're suggesting is, as I said at the beginning, is the way people behave even now at the height, right in the eye of the storm, could have potentially harmful long-term consequences. It's about doing things consciously, not unconsciously. Writing a story consciously, not unconsciously. And there are 3 dimensions to what you might recognize if you've worked with this on our trust model, but it works here too in our view. The first is that clarity piece. So this is about defining very clearly the way in which you intend to behave, referencing vision, values, whatever happens to exist, purpose, mission, the stuff that may already exist. If not, now's the time to very quickly define it. And to share that we call it a formal agreement, but to be clear that there's some kind of commitment, if you like, a manifesto that every organization may have itself, potentially its ecosystem, to say this is how we're going to behave, even if we're making some very tough decisions. And then ensuring you're defining these other 2 dimensions to this trust model. The first is that, as I said, those behaviors, we call that the character. So in other words, this defines the way in which you do things. Not what you do, it's how you do it. And the intention that you have of it. And the intention divides. I mean, Philip put it very clearly before. I thought it was brilliant. Are you transactional or emotional? We would say, are you transactional or are you relationship focused? Are you thinking, how do I act in a way that makes it very clear, both in my decisions and the way in which I communicate those decisions, that the relationships that I have that are so critical are at the center of my thinking. They're not secondary, even if there are some tough things that needs to happen. And of course, as we emerge or begin to think about emerge, those that have hopefully, touch wood, survived and begin to think about emerging, that's when that will become ever more important. And the 3rd dimension is capabilities. So of course, there's a lot of people thinking, what can I do now, given that the restrictions that I face? And some people will have obviously, if you're shop and you're closing, that's a massive restriction. But it should also raise the question, what can I do in this circumstance, potentially leveraging an ecosystem that I may or may not have fully leveraged before? What can we do, in other words, not what can I do? And that may be a strong question. Good example, restaurants that have never done takeaway suddenly teaming up with Deliveroo and others to say, we'll deliver food because we know you can't come and eat here anymore. Well, that small story writ large with large organizations can be a catalyst for innovation, for new capabilities. And our suggestion anyway, even in good times, is that the way in which you define your capabilities, if you're going to build trust with clients, should always be something that's reinvented, reinvigorated, reviewed, so that part of your capability is to innovate and constantly provide additional value on behalf of the outcomes the client is trying to achieve.
Stuart, may I just add, the foundation of clarity to me is I just want to pick that up. A board sits in a room and talks about, this is our strategy. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how do you get every participant in an ecosystem or a relationship to be able to explain and explore the vision and the behaviors and do it consistently. And it's a new level, a new depth, I should say, of investment in clarity, which we think is the foundation for trust. If I understand what you're trying to do, how you're trying to do it, and the capability you bring, and then you deliver on it, I'll build trust with you. But it's all the flim flam, all the variation that we've allowed in that kind of activity, which has undermined it so badly.
Philip, I'd just like to invite you to come back on what you heard, also this thinking from your perspective before we move on.
Thanks. Yeah, I absolutely support all of the things that have been said this morning, and I think we've all said in different ways we're seeing this sort of ironing out and businesses going the right way or the wrong way. And I thought the airline story was a really good articulation of that from Jonathan. And I think I was on a webinar on Monday with a girl who runs a restaurant cafe, and she's obviously shut down. She's trying to do deliveries. It's not working very well. But what she's doing is cooking soup every lunchtime for NHS workers, voluntarily, and providing sustenance to the people that are so important. And for me, as I think as Jonathan rightly said, that will live in the memory of people in that locality. And I think Kevin's point is very valid, that this isn't around, going into the boardroom and setting a strategy. This is around creating a culture in which the whole organization, the whole ecosystem buys in to what we're trying to achieve. And what we're trying to achieve is a climate of trust and cooperation and partnership. Call it what you want, but we want a culture where everyone feels comfortable with doing the right thing. And I think that clearly comes from the top, but it needs to permeate right across the organization if it's going to be effective.
Thank you. Let's just move on to some other thoughts, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're suggesting is there's this need to re-engage, that to do the kind of things that Philip's just talked about, put the effort in to think about who do we now need to engage with, and is it even the same group that we were previously engaged in? Are there new key stakeholders in our future that we need to engage with to develop this strong sense of shared vision and clarity about what we do in the marketplace, who we can co-create and define what are the behaviors that we wish to see in ourselves and in our ecosystem, and then what are the capabilities that we might create. And to my sort of vision of this is that it's not just what we do today, and Stuart explained this earlier, it's think about synergistically what could the partnerships or the ecosystems bring to each other, that together the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I don't just mean externally. I've seen so many big businesses which are fragmented and siloed. How many businesses do we go to, Stuart, where they say the big problem is we're silos here? And this is a massive opportunity for us to step back and say, let's build our business as an ecosystem and think about these key key issues as we go to market. And I'd welcome if anybody's got any final comments on that idea, of an internal ecosystem and then an external ecosystem. I can't, Stuart, I'm not in that position. I can see if there's any people. If there's no people, one of the people I know is out there is Martin Proctor. I'd be interested. Look, Caroline looks like she's got something she wants to say. Great, Caroline, let's unmute you and get you to unmute yourself, Caroline, please.
I just unmuted you, Caroline, so you can speak if you want to. I've just turned you on. You want your observations, if you're able to give them.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was listening, but I wasn't sure of the question specific to me.
Yeah, I'm saying there's an opportunity, Caroline, for large organizations to reflect on themselves, not as a bunch of silos and different operating systems, but as an ecosystem, and whether this is a big opportunity. And I wonder if you had a thought on that.
Yeah, I do. I'm in quite an interesting position at the moment, which Stuart will be aware of. So currently I work for a government arm's length body that looks after a very large infrastructure involved in transport. And I'm leaving there very shortly to go and work for one of our key suppliers, construction suppliers. So I'm kind of in between jobs. So this is really interesting for me because I'm seeing one organisation do things one way and another organisation I'm going to do things another. The organisation I'm with at the moment, or the government body I'm with at the moment, are trying to, as they need to do, I think, carry on its business as usual. They're keeping the country moving, is their phrase, because they need the lorries need to get where they need to go, and so they're keeping the supply chain involved in keeping the country moving, which I think is great. And then the supplier that I'm moving to in a few weeks is also trying to keep the country moving and do what they can do and keep their supply chain and their ecosystem involved, because they use a lot of SMEs and small subcontractors who need to keep going and need the work to continue. So for us it's quite difficult, but I think everyone is doing that. Let's move forward, let's keep this going, which I think is great. And it's good to see those supply chains working together. Nobody's a real standout of doing anything they shouldn't be doing, I don't think. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with how things are moving, and certainly in that sector.
Excellent. I think it's interesting. I guess what we're suggesting is and it sounds like you're talking about it. Don't just keep it going, but find some time to step back and say, what is it we all need to do? What can we collaborate towards doing? What is our vision for how we can operate together, and really leverage that relationship? But thank you. That's good to know, since that's an important part of all our business. Is there anybody else out there, Stuart, who'd like to participate?
I can't see any hands going up.
Well, we're getting very close to the end time. So I think if I could just close this up, and Stuart, you obviously can add a close as well. But look, this is the kind of work that Mutual Value we do with organizations, and we're very keen to bring our skills and our experience of helping people get that clarity, understand and make the choices on how they want to be seen and behave, and to help them explore the capabilities that they could create in their ecosystems. That to us is fundamental. We think it's such a major opportunity in the market. We're doing a series of these webinars. Hopefully they spark thinking and give you some new ideas, or just give you comfort, whatever, that you're doing the right thing. But if we can help you, or you'd like to discuss these further, we've put our mails up there. And let me say thank you for your participation, and our best wishes for your growth and survival post-COVID. Stuart.
Two quick thank yous. Firstly, Philip, thanks very much for taking part. Really, really welcome to have you. And secondly, Kevin, if you're in New York, it must be 6 o'clock in the morning when you start. Sorry, earlier than that. Yeah, 6 o'clock. So thank you very much for coming on such an early start, and really appreciate your participation. Yeah, if you feel this has been interesting, not only there's another one of these at 4 o'clock, so if colleagues you think might find it interesting, please share it with them. And of course, we've got a series, and we'll send you details of that.
And we should have said that this has been recorded and becomes an on-demand webinar. So just to let you know, if anybody else wants to see it that way, they're very welcome to do so.
Thank you. 11:45 on the dot. Thank you very much for taking part.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.